Ma'am, our billing system doesn't mistakes.
I understand the pricing perfectly. My card was charged twice for the same night.
If our standard pricing is at outside your budget, I can recommend several alternative properties that might be more
This is my hotel.
Your hotel. Lady, I know every owner, every board member, every person with any real connection to this property. And you are definitely not one of them.
you're not calling anyone.
Desmond. This is Dr. Naomi Weston. I've just been physically assaulted in the lobby of the DAT.
Atlanta, 1979. The kind of summer night that sits on your chest like a wet hand and doesn't move. Naomi was 12 years old enough to read, old enough to understand what a vacancy sign meant, old enough to know that the man walking back toward their car, shoulders pulled in, jaw locked, not looking at her, had just been told there was no room. Except there was. The sign said so, VACANCY. Glowing orange against the Georgia dark, she had sounded out every letter twice, the way her father had taught her. Dr. Leonard Weston, professor of American history, 23 years at Morehouse. The man who could recite the Gettysburg Address forward and backward, and had once reduced a roomful of graduate students to silence with a single question. He stood at the car door and could not look his daughter in the eye. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. Naomi pressed her cheek against the cool glass of the window, looked at that sign, held it in her gaze the way you hold something you are trying to understand, until the orange bled into the dark around it. Until it became just light, just a shape, belonging to no one, meaning nothing. She didn't cry. She was 12. She already knew that crying didn't change a sign. Thought, someday. Someday that sign will have my name on it. Not a promise, not a prayer. Just a fact she hadn't finished writing yet. Her father started the car, pulled away from the curb without a word. The orange glow shrank in the rear window. Then it was gone, but she kept looking at the place where it had been. For a long time after, long after it disappeared. 45 years is a long time to carry something. But Naomi Weston had never been the kind of woman who put things down just because they were heavy. She built her first hotel at 38. A 200-room property in Charlotte that nobody believed in except her and two investors who later admitted they'd said yes, mostly because she'd been so certain. Then Nashville, then Phoenix, then Denver and Miami, and 3 more cities in the years after that. Then the flagship, the one she'd designed herself from the ground up. Down to the marble in the lobby, the weight of the door handles, the specific angle of the windows so that morning light would fill every corner of the entrance at exactly 9 a.m. Every single morning, without fail. Westin Grand Hotel, Chicago, 40 floors of steel and glass and intention. Gold letters above the entrance that you could read from half a block away in any weather. Her name, on the building, exactly the way she'd promised that orange sign in 1979. She was 57 years old now, CEO and founder of Westin Hospitality Group, 12 properties across 9 states, 3,000 employees whose names she still tried to learn when she visited. A company that had been built on one idea so simple it had taken her a lifetime to understand how radical it actually was, that everyone who walked through the door deserved to feel like they belonged there. That welcome was not a luxury. It was the entire point. This morning she was walking through her own front door as a stranger. No announcement, no advance team, no company car with the plates everyone at the property would recognize. Just a navy dress, low heels, a small wheeled suitcase, and a reservation made under a name her assistant had chosen at random from a list of common surnames. Because 37 complaints don't investigate themselves. 37 formal complaints filed at the Westin Grand over the past 14 months. She had read every single one, at her desk, at home, on the plane, in the margins of other meetings. Guests claiming they'd been asked for extra deposits that other guests weren't asked for. Staff reporting that certain customers were flagged before they'd even reached the desk. Housekeepers written up for things their colleagues did openly without consequence. A family whose wedding reception had been interrupted by a noise complaint filed by hotel management at a volume that the hotel's own monitoring system documented as well within permitted range. 37 complaints, all routed through proper channels, all marked resolved. None of them felt resolved. So she had called Simone Varga the way she always called Simone when something needed to be true before it was comfortable. Simone was 54 years old, and had been her closest friend since their first year of law school when they'd argued about precedent over cold coffee until 3 in the morning and discovered that they were both the kind of people who would rather be right than sleep. She had said, "I need to see it myself." Simone had said, "Then go see it, and call me the second anything happens." Naomi had thought, "Nothing will happen. I'll go in, look around, take notes, come out with a clearer picture." She hadn't expected anything to happen at all. Certainly not this fast. The morning doorman didn't look at her. That was the first thing she noticed. He was good at his job. Position perfect, posture correct, timing precise. But his eyes moved past her to the stepping out of a silver Mercedes that had pulled in behind her cab. His face opened up for them, easy, warm, a small bow that said, "You are expected here. You are welcome here. I see you." Naomi noted it, stored it, kept walking. It was everything she had designed it to be. The marble floor caught the morning light at the angle she had spent 4 months calculating with her architects. The chandeliers hung at exactly the right height. Not too grand, not too modest, the right weight of beauty. The flower arrangements were fresh. The ambient sound level was perfect. Something slow and unhurried moved through the space. She had built this room to feel like a rival. She walked across it now and felt like a stranger in it. 3 front desk stations, 2 occupied. She approached the nearest. The name tag said Corden Briley. 27, maybe. Clean cut, professional neutral in the way that hotel training produced. An expression that could mean welcome or could mean nothing at all, depending on who was reading it. "Good morning." Naomi set her bag down, smiled. "I have a reservation." No smile back. Fingers moved to the keyboard. "ID and credit card, please. No greeting, no warmth, just processing." She reached for her wallet. At the station beside her, a different clerk was checking in a couple. No ID requested, no card asked for, just warmth and welcome and the easy assumption that everything was already in order. She placed her ID and credit card on the counter. Corden's eyes moved across the ID. Something shifted behind them, something small, subtle. The kind of thing you'd miss if you hadn't spent 57 years learning to read exactly that thing and exactly that expression. "There seems to be an issue with your previous charge," Corden said, frowning at the screen. Not at her. At the screen. "Yes." Naomi kept her voice easy. "I noticed a double charge when I booked online. I'd like to have it corrected before I check in, ma'am." The voice came from behind the desk, deep, unhurried. The voice of a man who had never in his professional life felt the need to hurry for anyone. She turned. Brad Holloway walked toward her the way certain men walk through spaces they believe belong to them. 44 years old, dark suit that fit well and knew it. White shirt pressed to a point that suggested someone else pressed it for him. Cufflinks that caught the light. The kind of man who had learned early that the right combination of size and certainty and the correct last name could move through the world without friction, and had spent 20 years confirming this theory. His jaw was set. His expression was the mild, pleasant contempt of someone who had already decided what kind of person he was dealing with before the conversation had started. "Is there a problem here? I was explaining to your colleague about a double charge on my reservation." She kept her tone professional. Light, even. Just a guest with a billing question. "It's a straightforward issue. I'm sure you've misunderstood our rate structure." He stepped behind the counter with the ease of a man stepping onto his own porch. "We're very clear about our pricings. I understand the price perfectly," she said it without heat. Just fact. "My card was charged twice for the same night. Ma'am." He placed both hands flat on the counter. The gesture of authority. The posture that certain men use the way other people used punctuation. To end things. To close doors. "I've been managing luxury properties for 15 years. Our billing system doesn't make mistakes." 15 years. She had been building this industry for 22. "I'd like to speak with someone in authority," Naomi said. The smile moved across Brad Holloway's face slowly, like something spreading. You're looking at him, and here's what Naomi Weston did in that moment. Nothing. She did not raise her voice, did not match his energy, did not let the thing that was happening in her chest, that old precise heat she had first felt at 12 years old, pressing her face against a car window, become anything visible on her face. She just looked at him. Corden Briley's hands had gone completely still on the keyboard, entirely still. Eyes moving between the two of them with the careful attention of someone watching a road and not certain what was about to come around the next bend. Brad drummed his fingers on the counter. "Look, you're holding up other guests." She looked behind her. The lobby was not crowded. There was no line. She looked back at him. "I'm simply asking for the double charge to be corrected," she said. It's an accounting matter, Rue. The rates are the rates, he said it slowly. The specific slowness of someone who has decided the person they're speaking to cannot keep up and has adjusted their pace accordingly. If our standard pricing is outside your budget, I can recommend several alternative properties that might be more. This is my hotel. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out the way certain things come out when you have held them for long enough. Not loud, not dramatic, Rue. Just certain. The way you state something that has always been true and is simply tired of waiting to be said. Brad stared at her, then he laughed. Short, sharp, not amusement. Something else wearing amusement as a disguise. Your hotel. He looked around the lobby slowly, theatrically. The gesture of a man inviting an audience to share in something he found funny. Lady, I've worked in this building for 5 years. I know every owner, every board member, every person who has any meaningful connection to this property. His eyes moved over her once. The kind of look that takes inventory and announces its findings. And you are definitely not one of them. She reached for her credit card. Brad's hand shot across the counter. His fingers closed around her wrist. The world went quiet. Not the silence of an empty room. Silence that happens when every sound gets suddenly far away. The music, the elevator chime in the distance, the roll of luggage wheels somewhere behind her, all of it receding. While the thing happening right in front of her became the only real thing in the room. His grasp was firm, deliberate. You're not calling anyone. He turned toward the security guard near the entrance. We need this woman removed from the... Take your hands off me. Her voice was clear, not loud. She didn't need to be loud. She needed to be heard, and she was. Every person within 30 feet of her heard it. Brad released her wrist, and then he came around the counter, fast, several hard steps. The movement of a man who had decided something needed to end and was going to end it himself. He was in front of her now, close enough that she could see the flush at his collar. Close enough to know exactly what was about to happen before it happened. She did not step back. She would not step back, because stepping back was for people who believed they had something to apologize for. I will say this one final time, Naomi said. This is my hotel. Step back. Your hotel. The words came out like something tearing open. You entitled, the slap cracked across her face like a door slamming in an empty house. The sound of it. That sound went everywhere. Up into the vaulted ceiling she had designed. Across the marble floor she had chosen. Off the windows she had specified for the specific angle at which they caught morning light. It was sharp, precise, entirely unmistakable. And for one full second the entire lobby went absolutely still. Guests, bellhops, front deck staff, the man waiting by the elevator, the woman at the concierge station, everyone, frozen. An earring fell from her ear and hit the marble. The sound it made was very small, very clean, almost delicate. Naomi's heel caught, slightly. She found her balance. She pressed a hand to her cheek. She did not look away from Brad Holloway's face. She watched the expression on it move through several things in quick succession. Satisfaction, then a flicker of something different. Not regret, not yet. Just the hairline fracture of a man beginning to realize that he may have miscalculated something important. The first small crack in the certainty that he had just done something he was entitled to do. He took one small step back. She kept looking at him. Near the concierge desk, a woman had risen halfway out of her chair. Miss Ruth Ellard, 63 years old, head of housekeeping, 35 years in this building. She had been at that desk through 4 general managers, 2 full renovations, 1 ownership transfer, and 1 rebranding. She knew every inch of this lobby the way she knew her own hands. The exact sound the elevator made when it needed maintenance. The particular light quality of the lobby at 7 in the morning versus 11. Where the draft came from in winter, where the sound pooled in summer. She had recognized Naomi Weston the moment she walked through the front door. She had not said anything she was going to. But first she needed to see what this woman was made of. Now she knew. What Naomi did next was the thing she had been training herself to do for 57 years. In boardrooms, in negotiations, in the 1,000 moments across a career when the world showed her what it thought of her and invited her to show it what she thought in return. She took her hand away from her cheek. She picked up her phone. She dialed. Desmond. Her voice was exactly what it always was in a crisis. Clear, no tremor, professional in the specific way that communicates danger more effectively than raising your voice ever could. This is Dr. Naomi Weston. I've just been physically assaulted in the lobby of the Weston Grand by the property manager. I need you to lock down all security footage immediately. Nothing gets touched. Nothing gets transferred. Nothing gets deleted. Send everything to Simone Varga's office within the next 5 minutes and copy our legal team. A sharp breath through the speaker. Dr. Weston, are you? I'm fine. Do it now. She ended the call. Brad was still standing there. The flush had spread from his collar to his face, sweat at the hairline. But something in him was still running the old program, still looking for the version of this where he came out on top, still working through it. This is some kind of scam. He said it to the room, to anyone who would still meet his eyes. I've never seen this woman. She cannot be Dr. Weston. She's obviously Dr. Weston. Miss Ruth Ellard's voice, low, certain, carrying the particular weight of a person who has been waiting a long time to use it. She stepped out from behind the concierge desk. Her limp was more pronounced today. Cold mornings were harder, but she walked with the deliberate pace of someone who knows exactly where she is going and is going there regardless. She stopped in front of Naomi, looked at her directly, took her in, the dress, the hand still pressed to her face, the earrings still on from the floor, then said very quietly, "Should I call for medical assistance?" Brad made a sound, started to say something. Naomi raised one finger, just one. He stopped. "I'm all right, Miss Ruth," she said it with genuine warmth, the warmth of recognizing someone, of being recognized in return. "Would you help me gather all on-duty staff in the lobby, please?" Miss Ruth nodded once, and turned to do exactly that. 3 bells through the PA system. That was the signal. Had always been the signal. 3 bells meant all staff to the main floor. It meant fire drill or VIP arrival or a company announcement that couldn't wait. What it had never meant before was this. They came from everywhere. Housekeepers still pushing carts, kitchen staff in aprons, bellhops, front desk clerks from the other stations, the morning maintenance crew, the assistant events coordinator clutching a binder she'd been working from for the past hour, the restaurant manager who had been in the middle of a supplier call. They gathered in clusters, uncertain, whispering, looking from Brad to each other and back to the woman in the navy dress standing in the center of the lobby with her hand raised to her face and an earring on the floor that nobody had picked up yet. Cord and Briley had not moved from behind the front desk. Their face had the color and quality of old paper. Because in the 3 minutes since Brad had come around the counter, Corden had done one automatic thing, one routine thing. The kind of thing front desk staff do 100 times a day without thinking. They had pulled up the guest profile on their screen to add a note about the billing dispute, and the profile photo had loaded. CEO founder, the woman who was standing 12 feet away from them with her hand on her cheek. Corden read it twice, then a third time. Oh no, no. I knew her name, I knew her face. I have seen her face in every onboarding presentation since my first week here. I have seen her name above the entrance of this building every single day for 2 years, and I stood there. I stood there and I let it happen. Corden did not move, could not move, not yet. Something was happening that was bigger than the ability to move. Something was shifting in the room and in the world and in the particular geography of what Corden Briley was going to have to live with. Naomi let the room fill, let everyone arrive, let them all see her standing there, in her navy dress, with the mark on her face and the earring on the floor that she had not picked up and was not going to pick up. Not yet, because it was evidence. Because everything in this room right now was evidence. And she needed all of them to understand that before she said another word. She let the silence do its work. Then she spoke. For those of you who don't recognize me, her voice reached every corner of the lobby, not raised, just clear. The voice of a woman who had learned long ago that volume was not the same as authority. I am Dr. Naomi Weston, CEO and founder of Weston Hospitality Group. The room went the kind of still that has texture. 9 minutes ago, your manager physically assaulted me in this lobby. What you are seeing on my face right now is the result of that assault. She paused, long enough for all of it to land. This is not an isolated incident. Over the past 14 months, this property has received 37 complaints about discriminatory treatment of guests. 37 complaints routed through proper channels. All of them marked resolved. She looked around the room, slowly, meeting eyes where she could, noting the ones that looked away. I came here today to investigate those complaints myself. I did not expect such immediate and direct confirmation of exactly what I was looking for. Someone in the back made a sound. Not words, just the sound of air leaving a body. All current on-duty staff are terminated effective immediately. She said it without drama, without satisfaction. The way you say something that is both necessary and terrible. HR will contact each of you individually. Those found not to have been complicit in what has been happening here will have the opportunity to return. For those who were complicit, who participated, who watched and said nothing because it was easier to say nothing. She stopped. Today is your last day in this building. The room broke open. Voices, movement grew. Someone near the back said, "You can't do this," and someone else said, "Oh, God," and Brad Holloway said something about lawyers that Naomi did not hear because she had stopped listening to Brad Holloway approximately 8 minutes ago. She stood in the center of all of it, perfectly still. The way she had stood in the back seat of her father's car at age 12, watching an orange sign get smaller in the rear window and deciding, without word, without ceremony, that she was going to do something about the world that had produced that moment, even if it took her the rest of her life to figure out exactly what. An hour later, the small conference room off the main lobby, cool and quiet. The sounds of the lobby muffled behind the glass. Naomi sat with a cold water bottle pressed against her cheek. Desmond had confirmed the footage was locked. Simone's was already in motion. The HR team was processing. The legal team had been briefed. Brad Holloway had been escorted to the management office and told to wait, which he would do. For now, because the confidence was beginning to drain out of him the way water drains from a container with a hole in it, slowly, then faster than all at once. The door opened. Miss Ruth came in, sat down across from Naomi without being asked. The easy movement of someone who has decided she belongs in this room and is not going to ask permission to occupy it. She smoothed the front of her uniform with both hands, a habit, the gesture of a woman who had spent 35 years making things neat. They looked at each other for a moment, no preamble, no softening. "How long have you known about Brad Holloway's behavior?" Naomi asked. Miss Ruth's hands folded in her lap. "Since his first week," she said, 5 years ago. "But what he does, what he is, it didn't start with him. It was here before him. He just came in and made himself comfortable in something that was already here waiting for him." She reached into the pocket of her uniform and placed 3 notebooks on the table between them. Worn. The covers soft from years of being handled and closed and handled again. The kind of notebooks you bought at any drugstore, but that had been filled with something no drugstore could sell. "I started writing things down in 1989, Miss Ruth said. "I was 28 years old. I'd just watched a floor manager call one of our bellmen a word I will not repeat. I wrote it down because I thought somebody someday is going to want to know this. Somebody is going to care enough to look." Naomi reached for the first notebook, opened it. The handwriting was precise, small, deliberate, dates in the left margin, times, names, incidents described plainly without embellishment. The way someone writes when they know they might need to prove something later. When they have accepted that their own word will not be enough and are building something that will be. She turned pages, year after year, the small cruelties and the large ones. Patterns that repeated themselves with different names in different years, but always the same essential shape. A guest asked to move rooms with no explanation. A housekeeper passed over for promotion 11 months running. A family told a venue was unavailable on a date when the booking system showed it clearly open. Then Miss Ruth reached into her pocket again and placed something else on the table. A single sheet of paper, folded many times. The creases gone so soft, yellowed at the edges from years of being kept and carried and not shown to anyone. This was written by the general manager before the one before Brad Holloway, she said, Mr. Okafor. He sent it to corporate in 2019. He put everything in it, names, dates, incidents, patterns. He asked for an immediate investigation. She placed one finger on it, just touched it. They received it, they read it, and this is what they sent back. Naomi unfolded the paper, read it, in the lower right corner. A rubber stamp in red ink, reviewed, no action required. The room was very quiet. She read those 4 words again. Then set the paper down and smoothed it with the flat of her hand. The way you smooth something you are going to keep, something you are going to use. They knew, she said, not a question. They knew, Miss Ruth confirmed, and they made a choice. Because the Holloway family didn't want any investigation, and the Holloway family had weight to throw around. So corporate threw it the right direction and filed Mr. Okafor's report in a drawer and hired Brad Holloway 6 months later, and everyone got to go on pretending. Naomi looked at the memo, at the red stamp. "You've been carrying this for 35 years, she said. "I have, alone." Miss Ruth looked at her steadily. "Until today," she said. And she said it not as a relief, not as a sentiment, but as a fact. The way you state a fact that has taken a long time to become true. That evening, Naomi sat at a desk in a borrowed office across town. The printouts were spread in front of her, the staff complaint files, the security footage timestamps, Simone's preliminary financial documents, the memo with the red stamp. Miss Ruth's notebook stacked at the edge of the desk. Her phone rang at 9:47 p.m. Simone, and her voice had that particular quality. Not alarmed, not panicked, but compressed, tight around something she was working out even as she said it. I need you to hear something, Simone said, and I need you to hear it before you talk to anyone on the board. Tell me. Brad Holloway is Harrison Holloway's nephew. Harrison Holloway is one of the 3 founding shareholders of Weston Hospitality. He still holds 31%. I know that, I know you know. But here's what you don't know. A pause. The specific pause Simone used when she was about to change the shape of everything. For the past 6 months, Harrison Holloway has been in private negotiations with a private equity firm called Meridian Capital. They want to acquire his stake. Naomi said nothing. Meridian Capital has conditions, Simone continued, for the deal to proceed. I'm reading directly from an internal email I obtained through the discovery process. They want a more traditional management structure. Someone focused on growth metrics and less on activist hospitality initiatives. Another pause. They want you gone, Naomi. The deal doesn't close if you stay. The room was very still. Outside the window, Chicago held itself at its usual remove. Lit windows in every direction. Other people in other rooms, other conversations. The ordinary weight of a city going about its evening. Say the rest of it, Naomi said. The video shell was created the night before the incident. The distribution accounts are connected to Holloway Associates. Brad messaged his uncle at 10:12 a.m., 25 minutes after he hit you. Simone read it flat, without inflection, letting the words carry themselves. Phase 1 complete, confirmed distribution channels. Phase 1. She sat with those 2 words. She had heard them once already. Read them on a screenshot, Corden had flagged. But hearing Simone say them out loud in that compressed, careful voice was different from reading them. It made them real in a different way. He was sent in to provoke me, Naomi said slowly. Yes, they needed a reaction they could use. Yes, they already knew what the reaction would be. They know you, Simone said simply. They knew you'd protect your people. They counted on it. They had the edited version ready before you fired anyone. They just needed you to give them footage to work with. Naomi stood up, walked to the window. The Westin Grand's upper floors were visible across the skyline, a handful of lit rooms, the faint glow of the lobby at street level. Her name above the entrance too far to read from here, but she knew exactly where it was. She had stood on the pavement below it, the morning the signage went up, and looked at it until her neck ached. Her name, still up there, Simone, she said. Yeah, I want the town hall in 3 days. Full public, live stream, no filtering, no corporate communications team. Just the evidence and the people who lived inside it. A beat. That's a significant escalation. They escalated first. They escalated months ago. I'm just the last one to find out. Another beat, shorter. I'll start making calls, Simone said. One more thing. Naomi pressed her fingers against the cold glass of the window, looking out at her building, at her name, at the thing she had built from nothing because at 12 years old a sign had told her she didn't belong and she had decided to make that sign a liar. Find out everything about Article 7, Section 12, silence. Then, the civil rights provision, the one I wrote into the original charter, in 2009, when everyone in the room told me it was unnecessary. She paused. Pull the exact language. I want to know what I actually gave myself. She heard Simone already moving, already typing. The particular sound of a very good lawyer realizing she has more to work with than she thought. Naomi, yeah, they don't know about the notebooks. No, They don't know about Corden. No. And they definitely don't know you wrote a clause that lets you strip their voting rights with documented evidence of what they've been doing. No, Naomi said. They don't. She looked out at the gold letters she couldn't read from here but knew were there. Always there, still telling the truth. They thought this was a phase 1, she said. Let's show them what phase 2 looks like, Simone said. Naomi set the phone down, stood at the window for a long time. Thought about a 12-year-old girl in the back seat of a car watching an orange sign get smaller in the dark. Thought about 35 years of careful handwriting in worn notebooks. Thought about a rubber stamp in red ink and 4 words that someone had believed were final. No action required. She turned back to the desk, sat down, and began to work. She woke up to 47 missed calls. Not 40, not 50. 47, which is a specific number, the kind that means something went wrong while you were sleeping, and the world kept moving without waiting for you to be ready. 5:14 a.m. The Chicago skyline through the window looked exactly as it always did, indifferent, lit. going about its business the way cities do at hours when most people are still horizontal, and the night shift is finishing, and the morning shift hasn't fully arrived yet, and the city exists in this brief, strange in-between that belongs to nobody in particular. She picked up the phone, opened the first text. From Simone. Sent at 4:52 a.m. Turn on the news. Any channel now. She found the remote, the TV came on, and there she was. Except it wasn't her. It looked like her. Same navy dress, same lobby, same morning light through those windows she had specified herself. But something was wrong, and it took her exactly 3 seconds to understand what, because the human brain, even a well-trained one, resists accepting certain things before it absolutely has to. The video started after the slap. Just after. Not at the beginning. Not with Brad's condescension or the grip on her wrist or the sound that had bounced off her own marble floors. Just after all of that. So, what the world was seeing was a woman in a navy dress standing in a luxury hotel lobby ordering people around. Her voice had been processed, just slightly. Just enough to push it higher, sharper, less measured than it actually was. Background music underneath that made everything feel unstable and anxious, like something had already gone wrong before you knew what it was. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, Hotel CEO conducts mass firing. Witnesses describe racially charged tirade. Racially charged. She said both words out loud quietly, in an empty room at 5:14 in the morning, just to hear what they sounded like applied to her. Then her phone buzzed. Frank Ald Chairman, 5:16 a.m. She let it ring. Opened the next text. Desmond Webb, CO 4:58 a.m. Stock down 12% in pre-market. 3 major conference clients have flagged concerns. Emergency board call requested for 8 a.m. Then Simone again, 5:03 a.m. Found something in the metadata. Call me before you talk to anyone on the board. Do not talk to the board before we speak. And then at the bottom, a number she didn't recognize. A single line, I was there, I saw what he did. I know what they're doing with the video. I want to help. C. Briley. She read that one twice. Cordon Briley. The front desk clerk with the still hands and the paper-white face and the eyes that had known. She was certain of it, exactly who was standing across that counter and had looked away anyway. She typed back 2 words. Call Simone. Then she got up, showered, dressed, put on the charcoal suit she kept for the meetings where she needed to be taken seriously by people who were not predisposed to take her seriously, and drove to Simone's office for 6. Simone's office at that hour looked like the inside of a mind that had been working very hard and very fast and had decided that tidiness was someone else's problem. Papers across every surface. 3 laptops open. A legal pad so full of notes the margins had started growing their own submargas. 2 paralegals in the corner working with the focused quiet of people who understood that what they were doing was important and that talking about it could wait. Simone handed her a coffee without looking up. The metadata on the viral video, she said. The file was created at 11:47 p.m., the night before the incident. Naomi sat down slowly. Before. The shell existed before the footage did. Someone had the distribution framework ready. They just needed to drop footage into it and press send. Simone finally looked up. Which means this wasn't Brad acting alone in the moment. This was coordinated, prepared. They knew what they were going to do with whatever happened in that lobby before anything happened in that lobby. The family. Naomi held the coffee, just held it. They were that certain I'd react. They know how you operate, Simone said. Not an accusation, not even a criticism. Just an observation from someone who had studied the situation with the cold clarity of a person whose job was to see things as they actually were. They knew you'd protect your employees. They knew you'd act decisively. They built the whole thing around what they knew you'd do. Phase 1 done, she'll react. Give it 24 hours. She had read that message 6 times now, each time it landed differently. The first time, shock. The second, anger. The third through 5th, something cold and precise that was not quite anger anymore. By the 6th time, it had become something else entirely. Information, just information. And information, in the right hands, at the right moment, was the only currency that actually mattered. The board meeting was at 8. Frank Alderton sat at the head of the table, 68 years old, silver-haired. The kind of man who had been in rooms like this one for long enough that he had stopped noticing how the power in them moved. He looked tired. Not guilty, not ashamed. Just tired in the specific way of someone who had been hoping not to have to deal with something and was now dealing with it in the full public view he had been hoping to avoid. There were 12 board members. 2 were visibly uncomfortable, from the moment Naomi walked in. 3 were professionally neutral in the way that meant they had already decided something and were waiting for the appropriate procedural moment to say it. The rest were watching Frank. Simone placed her laptop at the center of the table without ceremony. "Before we discuss anything else," she said, "I want everyone in this room to see what actually happened." She played the full unedited footage, from the moment Naomi walked up to the front desk, through Cordon's cold reception, through Brad's arrival and his escalating contempt and the grip on Naomi's wrist, through the moment that made several people around the table flinch, even though they had been briefed, even though they thought they were prepared, because there is a difference between being told something happened and watching it happen in a room you cannot leave. The sound of it through the laptop's small speakers was still enough. In the silence after Simone closed the laptop, Thomas Beckett spoke first, 62 years old, the bored voice for financial reality. The man rooms turned to when they needed to talk about money without looking like that was the only thing they were talking about. "The stock is down 15% in pre-market now," he said. 3 major conference bookings have flagged concerns. 2 of them are requesting calls with board representatives today. A woman was assaulted on camera, some said. And the response to that assault has created significant liability for the company. The response. Simone let those 2 words sit on the table between them, like objects. Like things with weight, a CEO was struck in her own property. Her response was to call corporate secure evidence and conduct an emergency staff meeting. "You're describing that as liability." Beckett opened his mouth. Frank put his hand up slightly. Beckett closed it. Frank looked at Naomi directly. She had known Frank Alderton for 11 years, had argued with him across tables like this one, had trusted him in the specific limited way you trust a board chairman, which is not entirely the same thing as trust but can look like it from certain angles. She watched his face very carefully now. Naomi. His voice was measured, the voice of someone choosing each word like stepping stones across uncertain water. The Holloway family still holds 31%. Their attorneys have been making calls since yesterday evening. They're proposing a private resolution to avoid further public damage to the brand. What kind of resolution? A temporary step back. 6 months. Let the executive committee manage the situation while we conduct a formal independent review, and no, just that word, just no. Frank blinked. "Naomi?" "No, Frank." The room was very still. She looked at him, then at all of them, the uncomfortable 2, the 3 who had already decided, the others who were still watching Frank, waiting to understand which direction to lean. "I was physically assaulted in my own building," she said, "on camera, in front of guests and staff, by a man whose family has been secretly negotiating to sell their stake under conditions that require my removal. And you're suggesting I step back." "We're suggesting," Beckett said carefully, "that we need to be strategic about how we respond to a situation that is actively damaging shareholder value." "I know exactly what you're suggesting." She stood, picked up her bag. "I'll be here when the board has decided which side of this they're standing on. Until then, I have work to do." She walked out, did not look back. Looking back was for people who weren't sure about the direction they were heading. Cordon Briley was waiting in Simone's conference room, sitting with both hands flat on the table. The deliberate stillness of someone who has made a decision and is making themselves stay inside it before they can change their mind. Baseball cap pulled low, regular clothes instead of the hotel uniform. The visible evidence of a person who had stepped out of one version of themselves and was not entirely sure yet what the next version looked like. Naomi sat across from them, just looked at them for a moment. "Let the room be quiet." "You called," she said. "I did." Cordon's voice was steadier than their hands. "I should have, that morning. When I pulled up your profile and recognized you, I should have said something. I should have done something." They stopped, reset. "I knew who you were. The second your ID ran against the system. Your profile photo loaded and I knew exactly who was standing in front of me, and I stood there and I followed the protocol anyway. Why? Not an accusation. A real question. She needed to understand it." Cordon looked at the table for a moment. "Because Brad was there. And because I had been telling myself for 2 years that the things I was being asked to do were just policy, and if I didn't think too hard about what the policy actually meant, then I could go home at the end of the day and feel like I was just doing my job." They stopped again. "I knew it was wrong. I had known for a long time. I just needed someone to make it impossible to keep pretending I didn't." Naomi nodded slowly. "What do you have for us?" Cordon opened a bag, placed a drive on the table, a folder. a phone with screenshots already organized and labeled. The preparation of someone who had been thinking about this moment for longer than just the past 24 hours. 2 years of internal staff chat logs, they said. Brad ran what he called a heightened scrutiny protocol. That's what it was called in writing. What it actually was, they swallowed once, was a systematic process for flagging guests based on race before they checked in, before they had done anything, before they had even arrived. Staff received notifications on their terminals that certain guests required additional verification. Simone was writing without looking up. The email chain, Corden continued. Brad directing the editing of security footage from 3 prior incidents. Guest complaints were filed in each case. The footage was reviewed. The clips supporting the complaints were reformatted, made unavailable. One of the incidents was a family that had documented their entire stay and still couldn't get the hotel to acknowledge what the footage would have shown. And the footage from this incident, Simone said. Corden pulled up the screenshot, turned the phone around. A message, timestamped 10:12 a.m., sent from Brad Holloway's registered device to a contact saved as HFAS1 complete. Footage being prepared. Confirmed distribution channels ready. 10:12 a.m. The incident had occurred at 9:47. 25 minutes. Simone looked at Naomi. Something passed between them that didn't need words. The specific communication of 2 people who have known each other long enough to speak in the space between sentences, Corden said, very quietly, into the silence that followed. My grandmother worked in hotel housekeeping for 40 years. Different property. Not far from here, she'd come home and tell me things. Not to complain. She wasn't a complainer. She just told me so that somebody knew. So it didn't disappear into nothing. They looked at the drive on the table. She passed 2 years ago, and she never got to see anyone do anything about it. She just accepted it as the way things were. A pause. I didn't want to be someone who accepted it as the way things were. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Simone picked up the drive. Okay, she said, with the particular focus of a lawyer who has just understood the full shape of what she is working with. Let's build this. Amara Weston was 17 years old, studying communications on a scholarship at a community college 30 miles outside Chicago. She was tall, sharp-eyed, the kind of 17 that is already most of the way to the person it is going to be and knows it. Stubborn in the way of people who have decided early that the world contains certain things worth being stubborn about. She had been following the story from her dorm room since the previous morning. She had seen the viral video, the Chiron, the carefully processed audio. She had watched the commentators describe her aunt's response as unhinged and volatile and racially motivated, and several other words that she had also watched people apply to black women who asserted themselves in rooms that hadn't expected them to. Then she had kept looking. Because Imara was studying communications, and she understood at 17 that the first version of a story is rarely the complete version, and that the gap between the first version and the complete version was usually where the truth was living. She found the original footage through a small independent account, a hotel guest who had been standing near the elevator that morning and had kept their phone running. The full clip, unedited, with timestamps. Amara watched it, then watched the viral version, then watched them side by side. She sat with what she saw for approximately 4 minutes, then she recorded herself in her dorm room. No script, no production. Just her face and the specific focused anger of a 17-year-old who has identified an injustice and decided to name it out loud. She walked through both videos frame by frame, showed the timestamps, showed what had been removed and what had been added, showed the precise moment at which the edited version began and what that editing erased. She ended by holding up her phone, showing the original. This is my aunt. This is what actually happened. Watch the full video, and then ask yourself why you almost only saw the other one. Simple, specific, true. She posted it and went to her morning class. By the time she came back 2.5 hours later, it had 3 million views. By evening, it would be closer to 9 million. By the following morning, the algorithm would be surfacing the original footage more frequently than the edited version, because the original footage had become the story, and the algorithm, whatever else it was, understood stories. The family had not accounted for a 17-year-old with a phone and a communications textbook, and 40 years of family history sitting in a dorm room deciding she had seen enough. Naomi heard about it from Simone at 2:14 in the afternoon. Your niece, Simone said. Is she the one who goes by Amara Weston on her public profile? I don't monitor her social media. You might want to start. A pause with something in it that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. She's at 2-3 million and the number is still moving. Naomi found the post, watched it, then watched it again. This kid, this stubborn, clear-eyed kid sitting in a dorm room with a water bottle on the desk behind her and a textbook she hadn't put away, and the particular calm fury of someone who has decided that watching something wrong happen and saying nothing is itself a kind of choice, and she was not making that choice. She called her. Amara picked up on the second ring. Auntie, a pause. Are you okay? I've been watching. I didn't know if I should call. I'm all right? Naomi pressed her fingers to her eyes for a moment. Just one moment. You didn't have to do that, Amara. Yes, I did. No hesitation. They were lying about you. Not just getting it wrong, actually lying. What was I supposed to do? Just watch it happen? A long pause. Naomi said, I suppose not. Are you going to fight back? I am. Good. A beat. Can I help? You already did. The second board meeting was the following morning, same room, same table. But the room felt different now. Imara's video had done something to the landscape overnight. The story had shifted. The original footage was spreading faster than the edited version. The algorithm had made its choice. And some of the board members who had been professionally neutral the day before were now something else. Not committed. Not converted, but aware that the ground they were standing on was less stable than it had appeared 24 hours ago. Beckett was still Beckett, The Holloway family attorneys have filed a preliminary motion challenging the staff terminations on procedural grounds, he said before Naomi had fully settled. They're also raising formal concerns about Dr. Weston's fitness to continue in a leadership capacity given the instability demonstrated during instability. She said just the word, returned it to him. They're characterizing it as an overreaction to a personal. She was assaulted. Diana Reeves spoke from the far end of the table. Everyone looked at her. Diana Reeves was 61 years old, former federal judge, the newest member of the board and the one who had spoken least in the first meeting. She was not speaking least now. On camera, she said, by an employee in her own building, and then she called corporate, secured evidence, assembled staff, implemented emergency protocols. She looked at Beckett with the expression of a former federal judge who has heard a great many arguments and has developed a precise instrument for measuring their quality. Which of those steps would you characterize as instability, Thomas? I'm asking seriously. Beckett opened his mouth. Take your time, Diana said. He closed it. Frank had been quiet through all of this, looking at his hands mostly. The particular quality of a man who was working something out in real time and had not yet finished working it out. He looked up. Naomi grew. His voice was quieter than it had been in the first meeting. Something had changed in it. Not much, just enough. There's something I need to tell you. Not in this room. He coughed her 11. She was at the desk again. The paper trail had only grown through the day. Cordon's documents, the chat logs, the edited footage comparisons, the metadata. The 10:12 a.m. message to Harrison Holloway. Frank's voice on the phone sounded older than it did in boardrooms, stripped of the professional coding. The voice of a man who was not performing anything for anyone because there was nobody left to perform for. I knew about the Okafor report, he said. She had suspected this. She let the silence hold. It came across my desk in 2019. I read it. I understood what it said, and I made a choice not to act on it. He paused. The Holloway family made it very clear what they would do if we moved forward with any formal investigation. They had the leverage to make that threat credible, and I decided that the cost of acting was higher than the cost of not acting. I told myself that was a practical decision. Another pause. Longer. It wasn't practical. It was wrong. I have been wrong about this for 5 years, and I have been carrying that around and not doing anything with it, and tonight I'm done carrying it. And now, she said, and now if Meridian Capital takes over, 3,000 people lose their jobs in 18 months. Every program you built, every initiative, every piece of what makes Weston hospitality what it actually is instead of just what it looks like on a quarterly report. All of it reorganized into something that produces better numbers and means nothing. He said it plainly. Without drama. They don't care what this company is, Naomi. They care what it's worth on a spreadsheet, and to them, those are the same number. She waited. There is a provision, Frank said. Article 7, Section 12 of the original charter. You wrote it yourself in 2009. She knew immediately. And then it hit her. The way things hit you when you have known something in theory for a long time and have never had to know it in practice, and the distance between those two kinds of knowing turns out to be significant. She had written that clause herself, had sat with her attorney 15 years ago building the corporate charter from nothing, and had insisted on a provision that every other person in the room had considered unnecessary, overly cautious, unlikely to ever be relevant. The provision allowed the CEO, with documented evidence of civil rights violations that had been enabled or covered up by shareholders, to call a special shareholder vote, to strip voting rights from any party found complicit, to nullify business agreements entered into as part of or in furtherance of discriminatory conduct. She had written it because she had believed, when she was building this company, that power needed to protect itself against the people who would eventually try to take it for the wrong reasons. She had written it, and then the years had passed, and the company had grown, and the provision had sat in the charter the way a spare key sits somewhere safe in a drawer, and you half forget about it because you stop believing you will ever need it. I wrote that, she said softly. You wrote it, and I have 7 board members who will sign the motion if you call the vote. 7 of 12. More than sufficient. A long silence. Frank. Yes, you're doing the right thing late. I know. That's different from doing the right thing. True. I know that too. His voice was very quiet, but it's what I have, and I'm offering it. She looked out the window. The Weston Grand's upper floors were lit across the skyline, her name above the entrance, too far to read from here, but in the exact position she had memorized. She had stood on the pavement below it the morning the signage went up and looked at it until her neck ached. The town hall is in 2 days, she said finally. If you mean what you're saying, I'll need you there. I'll be there, Frank said. She believed that he believed himself, which was not quite the same as belief, but it was enough to work with. She ended the call, typed a message to Simone. Article 7, Section 12. Start the paperwork. We're calling the vote. The preparation room at Simone's office. One full wall covered in a timeline that had been building for 2 days. Color-coded. Documented. The kind of organized precision that takes shape when someone with a very good legal mind has access to 35 years of careful handwriting and 2 years of digital records and a metadata trail that answered every question anyone might think to ask. Miss Ruth sat at the table, straight-backed, still in her uniform. She had come directly from a shift at the temporary property she'd been assigned to during the investigation closure. She placed the notebooks in front of her, opened each one to the pages she had already marked. Corden sat across from her. Baseball cap, folder, the USB drive. Simone stood in the middle of it all, the way she always stood when she was running something important. Like the room was a ship, and she was deciding its direction, and the direction was not in question. The town hall is not a press conference, Simone said. It is not a response to their narrative or a rebuttal of their version of events. It is a complete and documented presentation of what has actually been happening in that building, in front of a live audience, on a live stream, so that nothing can be edited or altered after the fact. She looked at each of them. We have been very thorough. Now we need to be very clear. Miss Ruth patted the notebooks. I've been waiting 35 years, she said. I can be as clear as you need. Corden looked at the documents arranged in front of them, the thing they had assembled piece by careful piece over the past several days. The thing that had started with a grandmother coming home tired from a 40-year career and telling stories to a grandchild who had been paying attention without fully understanding yet why it mattered that they pay attention. What happens if it's not enough? Corden asked. Not panic, just honesty. Simone looked at them steadily. It's enough, she said, because it's true, and because we have documented every piece of it. And because the people in that room are going to hear it from people who lived inside it for 35 years. She held up the drive, combined with what's on here, and the Article 7 motion already filed. She set the drive down. It's enough. Naomi had been quiet through most of this. She was looking at the wall, at the timeline, starting in 1989 with Miss Ruth's first entry, moving through decades, complaint by complaint, incident by incident, pattern by pattern. One stamped memo in the middle of it all. No action required. She thought about the words someone had left on the corporate voicemail. A young woman who had been in the lobby that morning, her voice slightly shaky but present, determined. You didn't break, and watching you not break showed me what that looks like. Please keep going. She thought about Amara in her dorm room. She thought about Miss Ruth buying her first notebook at a drugstore in 1989 and writing the first entry and closing the cover and putting it somewhere safe because she believed, even when the evidence for that belief was thin and getting thinner. That someday somebody would come who was strong enough to make it matter. She turned from the wall. "We're ready," she said, not reassurance, not a question. A fact she had decided was true and was going to make true. The night before the town hall, Naomi drove past the Westin Grand, did not stop, just drove past slowly. The way you drive past a place you love and are furious at and are fighting for all at the same time. The particular complicated feeling of caring about something enough to burn it down in order to save it. The gold letters caught the streetlights. Westin Grand, her name, still up there, still true. She kept driving. Tomorrow she was going to show the world exactly what those letters meant and exactly what it cost to make them mean something real. The community center on Wabash Avenue held 800 people. Every seat was filled by 6:30. Standing room along the walls. People pressed 2 and 3 deep against the back. A line outside that wrapped around the corner and kept growing even after the doors had technically closed. Because word had moved fast. Not through press releases, not through official statements, through phones, through group chats, through the specific speed of people telling other people, "You need to see this, you need to be there when this happens." 3 live stream cameras, independent operators, vetted personally by Simone over the past 48 hours. She had made certain that nothing recording this evening could be accessed, interrupted, or altered from anywhere outside this room. Because they had learned something about what outside access to footage could do. They had learned it the hard way. The stage was simple. A podium, a wide screen, 4 chairs, overhead lighting that made everything look exactly like what it was. No atmosphere, no flattery, no careful angles, just the particular quality of fluorescent light that makes truth impossible to soften and very difficult to look away from. Naomi stood in the wings. Navy dress. The same one. She had thought about it, whether wearing it was too deliberate, too pointed, whether it would look like performance rather than presence. She had held it in her hands that morning for a long time. Then she had put it on. Because it was the draster rippled through. Because it was the dress she had been wearing when it happened. She was not going to wear something different and give anyone the impression that she was dressing around what had been done to her, what had been planned and executed and then edited and distributed and broadcast to the world as something other than what it was. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a pale yellow-green. She had not covered it. Let them see. Let every person in that room and every person watching on a screen somewhere see exactly what this was and exactly what it had cost and exactly who was still standing anyway. Simone appeared at her shoulder, checked her watch. Her expression was the one she used when she was about to say something practical instead of something emotional, which was how Simone Varga handled the moments when she felt things most. 800 in the room, she said. 43,000 on the live stream and the number is still climbing. Naomi nodded once. "Miss Ruth?" "Has been ready," Simone said, "for approximately 35 years. Corden?" "Nervous, present, committed. Frank?" A pause that lasted exactly 1 second longer than the others. "He's here," Simone said, "sitting in the back row. Didn't want a seat on the stage." Naomi thought about that. About what it meant that Frank Alderton, 68 years old, chairman of the board of a company worth $4 billion, was sitting in a folding chair in a community center on Wabash Avenue because he had finally decided he could not keep doing the other thing. Late, she had told him. Late was what he had. It was going to have to be enough. "All right," she said, and walked out onto the stage. The room settled the way rooms settle when something real is about to happen. Not immediately, not all at once, but in waves. Conversations dropping from the front to the back until the last whisper at the far wall went quiet and there was only the sound of 800 people breathing in the same space at the same time. Naomi stood at the podium, looked out at them, took one breath. "My name is Dr. Naomi Westin," she said. "I am the CEO and founder of Westin's Hospitality. 4 days ago, I was physically assaulted in the lobby of my own hotel by a man who had been placed there, in part, to ensure that I would be. No preamble, no welcome. No thank you for being here. Just the truth. Starting from the beginning. I want to tell you what happened," she said. "All of it, in the order it happened, without editing. And then I want you to hear from people who have been telling parts of this story for a very long time. Longer than I have. To rooms that were not listening." She stepped back from the podium. Miss Ruth Ellard. Miss Ruth walked from the wings without hurrying. 63 years old. 35 years in that building. Tonight she was not wearing her uniform. She had a blazer, dark blue, the kind a woman buys for an occasion she has been preparing for without knowing exactly when it would arrive. She had bought this one 7 years ago and had been waiting. She carried the notebooks against her chest. All three of them. Like they were something that mattered. Because they were. Because they were 35 years of a woman deciding every single day that what she witnessed was worth recording, worth keeping, worth the belief that someday someone would want to know. She placed them on the podium, opened the first one, and began to read. Not fast, not slow, just steady. In the plain, clear voice of someone who has been over these words so many times they have become part of her, the way certain things become part of people who live with them long enough. October 14th, 1991, staff meeting. Floor manager referred to bellman Darnell Price as boy in front of guests and 3 employees. Darnell was 47 years old, March 3rd, 1996. Housekeeping supervisor passed over for assistant manager position. Hired, and since it was a 24-year-old with 6 months of experience. The supervisor had been there 9 years, June through August, 2003. Guests of Asian descent consistently assigned rooms on floors 2 through 4, regardless of reservation category. Ocean view rooms given to other guests without request. She kept reading, page after page, year after year. The room was so quiet you could hear the faint mechanical hum of the live stream cameras. You could hear people shifting their weight. You could hear Miss Ruth turn each page. And here is the thing about hearing something read aloud. The way it is different from reading it yourself. When you read it yourself, it stays inside you. When you hear someone else read it, in a real voice, with real breath between the words, it becomes a thing that exists in the air between you and every other person in the room. It becomes shared. It becomes impossible to unfeel. Miss Ruth reached the final entry. A family who had booked the hotel ballroom for their daughter's college graduation celebration. Security called by hotel management during the event. No complaint from any guest. Noise levels documented by the hotel's own monitoring system as within permitted range. The family received a partial refund and a form letter, marked resolved. Miss Ruth closed the last notebook, looked up at the room. I kept writing things down, she said, because I believed that someday somebody would care enough to look. She placed her hand flat on the cover. I was right. It just took longer than it should have. The screen behind her came to life. 2 videos, side by side, running simultaneously. On the left, the viral version, the one the world had seen. Starting after the slap, the processed audio, the music underneath that made everything feel wrong before you could name why. The chyron that had used the word tirade. On the right, the full footage. From the moment Naomi walked to the front desk, unedited, uncut. The room watched both, watched Brad dismiss her, watched him interrupt her, watched the grip on her wrist, and when the slap came on the right side of the screen, and did not come on the left side because it had been removed. The sound of it through the speakers made several hundred people flinch at the same moment, like a single body, like a shared nerve. A woman in the 3rd row put her hand over her mouth. A man behind her placed his hand on his wife's shoulder. A woman near the back, who had to be 75 years old and who had been sitting very straight throughout, closed her eyes for exactly 1 second, then opened them again, because she had seen this before, in other forms, in other rooms, in other decades, and she was going to keep her eyes open for this part. Simone stepped forward. The video on the left was created at 11:47 p.m., she said. The night before this incident took place, she let that settle. The file existed before the footage did, which means the plan to distribute an edited version was in place before there was anything to edit. It was prepared in advance. She pulled up the message on the screen. At 10:12 a.m., 25 minutes after assaulting Dr. Weston, the hotel manager sent this message to Harrison Holloway, a major shareholder in this company. Phase 1 complete. Confirmed distribution channels. 800 people read 5 words at the same time. The quality of silence in the room changed. It got heavier. Cordon Briley walked to the podium. Cap pulled low, hands on either side of the stand. The posture of someone who needs something solid to hold while they say what they came to say. I was at the front desk that morning, they said. I am telling you this with my name attached, because I need you to know that what I am about to say is not anonymous. I am a real person. I was there. And I went along with something I knew was wrong because I told myself it was not my problem. A pause. It was my problem, and I am doing something about it now. They walked through it. The heightened scrutiny protocol, the specific instructions for flagging certain guests before arrival. The 3 prior incidents where footage had been edited. The chat logs where management had set a tone that told everyone underneath them exactly what kind of place this was and exactly what kind of behavior would not only be permitted but expected. Corden placed the drive on the podium. Everything I just described is on here, they said. Time-stamped, named, 2 years of documentation. Available to any legal or law enforcement authority that requests it. They stepped back. Then said quietly into the microphone, my grandmother worked in hotel housekeeping for 40 years. She never got to see anything like this, but I think she would have been glad it happened. The room had been holding its breath for 40 minutes. And then the side door of the stage opened, and Frank Alderton walked out. No announcement, no introduction, just a 68-year-old man in a dark suit crossing the stage with the deliberate pace of someone who has made a decision and is going to stand inside it regardless of how it feels to stand there. The room did not know who he was, but they felt the weight of him. The way certain people carry the evidence of the choices they have made in the way they hold their bodies, in the way they walk into a room. He stood at the podium. My name is Frank Alderton, he said. I am the chairman of the board of Westin Hospitality Group. He paused. My communications team advised me not to be here tonight. They told me this was not the appropriate venue for board-level statements, that anything I said should go through legal review first. He looked out at the room. I have been taking advice like that for a long time. I am done taking it tonight. The room was absolutely still. In 2019, he said, this company received a formal internal report, filed by the then general manager of the Westin Grand, documenting systematic discriminatory practices at this property, naming employees, naming incidents, naming patterns, requesting immediate investigation. He stopped. Let the silence do its work. That report came across my desk. I read it, and I made a choice not to act on it because the shareholders it implicated had the weight to make inaction feel like the safer choice. He put both hands on the podium. It was not the safer choice. It was the wrong choice. And I am standing here because I am not willing to let someone else carry the consequences of that decision any longer than she already has. He reached into his jacket, drew out a document. 7 members of the Westin Hospitality Board of Directors have signed this motion, he said, invoking Article 7, Section 12 of the company's founding charter, a clause written by Dr. Naomi Westin herself in 2009. Calling for a special shareholder vote to strip out votings from any party found complicit in documented civil rights violations. He placed it on the podium. The vote will be held tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., and I will personally ensure that it proceeds. He stepped back from the microphone, looked at Naomi. I am sorry, he said, just to her, in the space between them, for what I should have done and did not do. She held his gaze, nodded once. Not forgiveness, not absolution, not the erasure of 5 years, but acknowledgement. That he was here, that he had said it in public with 800 people and 43,000 screens watching. That late, when it is all you have, can still be something worth offering. The questions from the audience lasted 30 minutes. Naomi answered everyone. She did not raise her voice, did not deflect, did not answer the question she wished had been asked instead of the one that was. Someone asked about the employees who had lost their jobs. Each case is being reviewed individually, she said. Those not complicit in what was happening will be offered the opportunity to return. Those who actively participated in a system designed to harm the people this hotel exists to serve will not. Someone asked about the board. 7 of 12, she said, and the motion is already filed with the court. Then a woman near the back raised her hand. She had to be close to 80. Sitting very straight, the kind of straight that is not performance but the habit of a lifetime. I want to ask you something personal, she said. The room got quiet in a specific way when he hit you, in that lobby. What did you think? Naomi looked at her for a moment. I thought about the fact that I had designed that lobby, she said slowly. That I had chosen that marble, those windows, the angle of the light. I had built that space specifically to be a place where people felt welcome and seen and safe. She paused, and I thought, this happened here because someone believed he could, which means the building was not enough. The name was not enough. The design was not enough. It has to be the people inside it. It always has to be the people. The woman in the back nodded, once, slowly, like that was the answer she had been waiting for. Not for tonight, for longer than tonight. The shareholder meeting was at 9 the following morning. The Meridian Capital Conference Room, 14th floor downtown. The kind of room designed to communicate what it costs to be in it. Glass and steel and a view that said we have already won whatever you came here to argue about. Naomi arrived with Simone. Brad Holloway was already seated with his attorneys, and his uncle Harrison Holloway, 61 years old, who had the look of a man who had spent his entire adult life in rooms where things went his way and was working very hard right now, not to show that something felt different about this particular morning. The 12 board members were seated, Frank at the head. Diana Reeves sat with her hands folded on the table. Her expression gave nothing away. The trained neutrality of a former federal judge who had learned that what your face does in a room can be as consequential as what you say. Simone presented the evidence. She had done this before. In rooms with higher stated stakes and worse apparent odds, she knew how to do it the way a surgeon knows how to make an incision, with exactly the right amount of pressure. Enough to open, not so much that you lose control of what comes next. The chat logs first, screenshots, timestamps, the heightened scrutiny protocol in Brad's own language, in his own messages, with his own name attached, the metadata on the edited video, the file creation time the night before, the message sent to Harrison Holloway at 10:12 a.m., the Okafor report from 2019, the red rubber stamp in the corner, no action required, the Meridian Capital deal documents, the condition buried 14 paragraphs into the term sheet, leadership transition to be completed prior to closing, current CEO position to be vacated. Then see Article 7 motion. 7 signatures. Harrison Holloway's lead attorney stood up 3 times. The first time, objection to the admissibility of the chat logs on grounds of improper acquisition. Simone placed Cordon Briley's signed affidavit on the table, along with a legal opinion from 2 independent privacy attorneys confirming the acquisition was lawful. The attorney sat down. The second time, challenge to the board's interpretation of Article 7, Section 12, arguing the provision applied only to external parties and not to founding shareholders. Simone placed the original 2009 charter on the table, open to page 47. The language was unambiguous. It had been written to be unambiguous, because the woman who wrote it had known, even then, that the people it might one day need to restrain would be exactly the people who would try to argue it did not apply to them. The attorney sat down. The third time the attorney stood, he looked first at Harrison Holloway. Harrison Holloway gave one most precise shake of his head. The attorney sat down and did not stand again. Frank called the vote. The board members recorded their decisions. The results came back in less than 4 minutes. Frank read them. His voice did not waver. The motion passes. Per Article 7, Section 12 of the Weston Hospitality Group Founding Charter, the voting rights of the Holloway family shareholding block are hereby suspended effective immediately. All pending business agreements predicated on leadership changes at the executive level are nullified. Dr. Naomi Weston's position as CEO is confirmed with the full support of the board. Harrison Holloway's jaw tightened. He looked at his attorneys. They looked at the table. Brad had been quiet through the entire presentation, arms crossed. The posture of a man maintaining something through the position of his body when all other options have been exhausted. He looked at Naomi. "You think this changes anything?" he said. Quiet, almost conversational. "People like you always think, Mr. Holloway." 2 officers in uniform had entered through the side door. The room had not heard them come in. They were simply there, present, with the specific weight that law enforcement carries when it arrives not as a threat, but as a conclusion. Brad looked at them, then looked at Naomi, and in his face for exactly 1 second was something she recognized, the absolute certainty of a man who has always been protected, who is realizing in real time that this time he is not. "Bradley Holloway," the first officer said, "you are under arrest for assault in the first degree and tampering with evidence." Brad stood, slowly, straightened his jacket out of pure habit. The last gesture of a man performing authority he no longer possessed. He let them move his hands behind his back. The handcuffs were very loud in that quiet room. He did not say anything else. He walked out between the 2 officers. The door closed behind them, and the room breathed 3 months later. The Westin Grand reopened on a Thursday morning in February. Chicago in February does not offer comfort. The wind off the lake has opinions it expresses directly and without apology. But at 9 a.m. the sun was doing what it could, and the light on the gold letters above the entrance was exactly what it had always been. Warm, certain, telling the truth. Inside, the lobby was the lobby she had designed. Same marble, same chandeliers, same angle of morning light through those windows. But everything inside it was different in the way that matters more than surfaces. The people. New training. Not the kind that teaches correct smile duration and the appropriate number of seconds for eye contact. The kind that takes time and requires people to sit with discomfort, to examine the assumptions they carry into a room before they bring them to a guest. The kind that Naomi had insisted on personally, and that Miss Ruth Ellard had helped design because she understood, from 35 years of watching, exactly where the gaps were and exactly how they could be closed. The nameplate on the office formerly occupied by Brad Holloway now read Ruth Ellard, General Manager. Miss Ruth had stood in the middle of that office on her first morning for a long time, not because she was overwhelmed, because she was taking inventory, the way she always had. Corden Briley was now head of compliance and guest experience, in a role that had not existed at this property before. A role whose entire purpose was to ensure that what had happened for 35 years could not quietly resume the moment everyone stopped watching. On the board near the main entrance, alongside the hotel's policies and commitments, was a simple framed card. The Ruth Ellard Scholarship Fund, supporting students from underserved communities pursuing careers in hospitality. Miss Ruth had tried to argue against using her name. Naomi had not argued back. The first guests of the reopening came through the doors at 9:15. A family, 3 generations, a grandmother and grandfather, she somewhere in her late 60s, he a few years older, their daughter and son-in-law, and a grandchild. A girl 17 years old, with the sharp, observant eyes of someone who had decided the world was worth paying close attention to. The grandmother's shoulders were slightly raised when she walked through the entrance. Naomi noticed it from across the lobby. She recognized what it was, the almost invisible tension that certain women carry into certain spaces, because they have learned across decades of small and large moments that welcome is not something you walk into. It is something you have to earn and re-earn, and then sometimes discover you did not earn it, after all. The front desk clerk was Angela Rice, new hire, recommended personally by Miss Ruth from a hospitality program at the community college. She looked up as the family approached. Good morning. Warmth that had not been trained into her. It was simply there. The Graham reservation? That's right, the grandmother said, slightly careful still. Welcome. Angela pulled up the reservation, smiled. I see you have a birthday in the group this weekend. The granddaughter looked up from her phone. 17, Angela said. We've prepared a few things for the suite, and our rooftop restaurant has a private table reserved for Saturday evening if you'd like it. The grandmother's shoulders came down, just slightly, just that small release, but Naomi saw it, because she had been watching for exactly that. She turned away before anyone could notice her. Walked slowly toward the tall windows on the far side of the lobby. The ones she had specified herself 15 years ago for the angle at which they caught morning light. They were catching it now, exactly as she had planned. She pressed one hand lightly against the glass. Outside, Chicago was going about its business. Cars and pedestrians, and the distant sound of the elevated train, and the ordinary texture of a city that held inside it, as all cities do, the full range of what people were capable of doing to each other and for each other. She touched her cheek gently. The bruise was entirely gone. Her skin was exactly what it had always been, but she could still feel the memory of it. Not pain, just the mark that certain moments leave. Not damage, evidence. Proof that something happened and that she had been there for it and that she had not gone down. She thought about her father, walking back to that car in Atlanta in 1979, hands steady on the steering wheel even when nothing else was. She thought about the morning after, when he had driven her back, parked across the street, said, "Look at it." She had looked. "It is just a building," he had said. Built by hands, which means it can be built differently, which means whoever builds what comes next, that could be anyone. She had thought he was trying to make her feel better. She had been wrong. He was telling her something true, something he had been carrying himself for a long time and had decided she was old enough to carry too. She thought about Imara, in a dorm room with a water bottle on the desk, holding up her phone, telling the truth to 9 million strangers because something in her had understood that silence was a choice, and she had decided not to make it. She thought about Miss Ruth, 28 years old, a drugstore notebook, the first entry, not knowing it would be one of hundreds, not knowing it would take 35 years for anyone to read it in a room full of people who were listening, but writing it down anyway, because she believed. The door to Miss Ruth's office was open. Naomi knocked on the frame. Miss Ruth looked up, reading glasses on, a property operations report in her hand. The expression of someone who has found, later in a long life than it should have been, that the work they were always capable of doing is finally the work they have been trusted to do. Naomi sat down in the chair across the desk. For a moment, neither of them said anything. How does it feel? Naomi asked. Miss Ruth considered. She was not a woman who answered questions before she had actually considered them. Like I have been carrying something heavy for a very long time, she said finally, and I put it down, but my arms still remember the weight. Naomi nodded. Does it feel like enough? Another pause, longer. Not yet, Miss Ruth said, but it feels like the right beginning. She looked at Naomi over her glasses. You? Same, Naomi said, and that was the honest answer, because it was not triumph, Rue. It was not the clean resolution that easier stories promise. It was the specific feeling of something having shifted permanently, genuinely, in a way that would hold, but in a world that still contained everything that had made the shift necessary. Still requiring watching, still requiring people who kept notebooks, and people who sent emails, and people who recorded themselves in dorm rooms and told the truth to strangers, and people who arrived late but arrived. In the lobby, the Graham family had settled in. The grandmother was at the concierge desk asking about a restaurant recommendation. Her granddaughter was standing near the entrance, looking up at the gold letters above the door, Weston Grand. The girl stood there for a while, just looking. Naomi watched from across the room. Then the granddaughter said something, not loudly, to herself as much as to anyone. But the lobby was quiet and the words carried. Someday, I'm going to put my name on something. The grandmother turned from the concierge desk, looked at her granddaughter, then looked at the gold letters above the door. Then she laughed, a real laugh, the full unguarded kind that belongs to people who have lived long enough to understand that joy is not a small thing and should not be treated as one. Baby, she said, I know you will. Naomi did not move from where she was standing. She did not introduce herself, did not make the moment about her. She just stood in the lobby she had built, in the light she had designed, on the floor she had chosen, and she listened to a grandmother tell her granddaughter a thing that granddaughters needed to hear. And she thought about 1979, and she thought about all the years between then and now. And she thought about what it had cost to get here, and what it would cost to stay here, and why the cost was worth it, and why it always had been, even when she could not quite see where it was all going. The gold letters were above the door, her name, still there, still true, still telling everyone who walked through that door exactly what this place was built to be, and what it was finally actually becoming.